Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, is it clear?
Good morning. Very clear.
Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. So
Are you in
we
the car?
are. I'm in the car. I just crossed over the border, so I'm by that currency exchange right after the border.
Oh,
I wanted to get into Canada at least at the time. Okay, so what we have over here is we have the pasuk that says as zeh toichlu. The pasuk says zeh toichlu mikoil asher b'moyim koil asher loisnaber b'kaskeses b'mayim b'yamim u'b'necholim oisom tochelu. And we learned from Ezeh Toichlu that we had a klal pratu klal in the pasuk that says you're not allowed to have fish without snapper bekaskeses, and that klal pratu klal we weren't sure if it should also include in what requires snapper bekaskeses, if we should also include boyros, um, boyros and sichen me'ora and shichen me'oros in that group. And the Baal says as that toichlu, it teaches us that even boyros shichen me'oros are also exempt from the halacha of snapper bekaskes. And that's where we finished off yesterday, learning through the klal pratu klal, which we could have learned to include Boyer Shichin Morris in the halachas of Snapper Vikas Keses, but since it says Zet Toichlu, therefore we say that the Boyer Shichin Morris are not included in the requirement of Snapper Vikas Keses. But we have another approach to come to the same conclusion, but to learn it a little differently. And that's the Vei Rabbi Shmuel. The Vei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, B'mayim Shtei Pamim, Ein Ze Klal Uprat. As we mentioned yesterday, that we have B'mayim, we have the two pratim, the two klolos, and then only afterwards, as it says, Yamim Uvanacholois, which is the prat. So the question is this a normal klal prat to klal? If first you have the two klolim, and then you have the prat, Zokt Veri B'Shmuel, we do not treat this. Unlike what we learned from the first Tana, the Veri B'Shmuel does not treat this like a standard klal prat to klal. Ein zeh klalu prat, el riba imiyut. We treat it like a riba imiyut. Now, all over the Chumash, there's a discussion in the Shloisha Aser Midas Hamur Spataya, Shatar Nidreshes Ben, do you darshan these arrangements using the klal prat uklal method, or do you darshan these arrangements with the riboy miyot for riboy method? Now, the riboy method is much more inclusive. Because if you only had a riboy and a miyot, and not second riboy, there you would say that the miyot tells us that you only include in the riboy ke'ein haprat. In other words, the klal pratu klal, it creates the same scenario as the ribu umiyot. Now, if you have a second ribu, that's much, much more inclusive. It includes almost everything, and the miyot only excludes one item. So that is how we're going to darshan these psukim, and we're going to reach the same conclusion, but using the different method. So the Vei Rabbi Shmuel Tana b'mayim shtei pamim ein zeh klal uprat el riba imuyit. B'mayim riba, that's the first riba. Then the prat of bayamim uvanacholim, that's the miyut. B'mayim chazav riba. Riba umiyut riba koil. Everything's included. In this case, the more you include, the more chomerdik it is, because all bodies of water that you find fish in, you must only eat those fish if they have snabber bekaskesses. So, my Rabbi, what are we including in which bodies of water are we including in the rule of snabber bekaskesses? Charitzin uneitzin liisura. Charitzin and eitzin, which are Rashi's charitzin, are long, narrow waterways, and the eitzin are ponds. So it's like ponds and ponds, and brooks. These are the types of bodies of water that we're going to include in the rule that requires snapper v'kaskesses. Umay miut, and what are we going to say would be excluded from the rule of snapper v'kaskesses? Bayros, shichin, uma'aros, l'hatera. Right, the Gemara. Ema, my riba, bayros, shichin, uma'aros, lisura. Maybe the riba yumit should be so inclusive. It should even include fish that you find in bayros, shichin, uma'aros, that they should also be governed by the rules of snapper v'kaskesses. Umay miut kalim, and say the only thing that's excluded is kalim. If fish suddenly appear in a barrel, zok to Gemara im kain toichlu maya hanilei. What are we going to learn from toichlu, which is inclusive, which tells us you're allowed to eat things without simonim? We'd have to apply that. We'd have to apply that to bayer shichnim arais, that they are kulavik. You're allowed to eat them. They're not included in the klal prat klal, and therefore you're allowed to eat them even without the simonim of snapper v'kaskesses. Correct Gemara, but ve'epachana. Why is it that we say that bayrais, shichun ma'arais are excluded from the rule, and charitin and the itzin are included in the rule? Flip it around. Say bayrais, shichun ma'arais should be included in the rule, and we should go to Chomer and we should require snapper v'kaskesses. And that's a charitin and the itzin. We learn from Azet Toichlu that you don't need snapper v'kaskesses for fish found in those type of ponds. Zok to Gemara, kedetani matisyo. The Tani matisyo by Yehuda. Matisyo by Yehuda taught us. Ma rois l'rabbis baris shichun ma'aris latera. Why would you say that fish found in baris shichun ma'aris should be excluded, should be exempt from the requirement of snapper v'kaskesses? Ulahoitzi charitin un itin lisura. And include charitin and the itin in the bodies of water that do require snapper v'kaskesses. Zok matisho mar bani bayros shichun marosh shehein atzurim kekelim. They are sealed like kalim, meaning the liquids inside them in a cistern doesn't leak out. No water leaks in and no water leaks out. Rainwater fills it up and it stays sealed. They're completely sealed. Otzer is sealed. That would not be like Yamim and Nechalim and Naharis. So therefore, they would not be included in the requirement of snapper v'kaskesses. And umaytani charitun and itin she'ein atzur kekelim, they have water coming into it, water leaving it. They're not sealed, and therefore they're more doimet to Yamim and Naharis, which have the requirement of snapper v'kaskesses.
And Yosy,
yes,
the Gemara is not bothered by the same kasha about the ribui that it's mayim, and then the mute.
So I'm very happy you brought that up, because we just saw from Devei Rabbi Shmuel, who says don't learn this with klal prat klal, learn this with ribui mute for ribui. And there's actually a shaila all over the Torah. What's the approach to take? Do you take the ribui mute ribui approach, or do you take the klal prat klal approach? The problem is we say every single day in the Bryce of Yishmo, klal prat klal. So clearly Rabbi Shmuel learns that when you approach such an arrangement, you work with klal prat klal, and not with ribui mute for ribui. So to answer that kasha, I'm going to use your kasha. He does have the kasha that you have two klalim and then comes the prat. And that's why it's not conventional. And that's why he doesn't learn it like he normally does with the klal prat klal. And that's why he approaches this particular instance with ribui miyut for ribui. And I believe that's exactly what the Gemara means earlier when the Gemara says the very b'shmol tana b'mayim shtei pamim ein ze klal prat ela ribui miyut. Bibalt, it says the klal two times and then comes the prat. So it's a non-conventional arrangement of a klal prat klal. Therefore, Zok Rabbi Shmuel, you don't learn this with a klal prat klal. This you learn with the ribui miyut ribui method.
So this is not Rabbi Shmuel's or debate Rabbi Shmuel's mahalach throughout Shas to always use
Well,
the ribui.
normally he does klal per to klal, but the about when you have two klalim and then a prat, there he says treat it like a ribui means for ribui.
It's good.
Okay, gavalti. So if you remember yesterday, the Gemara said it says this halacha that you don't need fins and scales, bimafurish, more explicitly, and then it also says it more subtly. And the Gemara says we should learn the sosim in amafarish. Just like by the mafarish, you don't need fins and scales for fish that you find not in yamim unaharos. So too the lima that it's more sosum refers to the same thing. At the time, we didn't know where is it sosum, where is it mafarish. So right away, we have to look at what are our options. So our options is with two psukim. We had one pasuk that was in the positive and one pasuk that was in the negative. So let's just review. The pasuk that was in the positive was a zeh toichlu. It says a zeh toichlu, mikoila asher b'amayim, koila asher shnabe v'kaskesas b'amayim b'yomim u'v'adentcholim oisam t'chelim. And the way we learned this pasuk was, ezeh toichlu mikol asher b'amayim, koila asher loi snaper v'kaskesas b'amayim b'yomim u'v'adentcholim. And what do we learn? Where do you need to have snabe v'kaskesas? That's only for fish that was found b'mayim b'yomim u'v'adentcholim. But fish found in other bodies of water, such as Ne'itzin, such as Bayai, such as Kalim, they don't have the requirement of Snabe Vikaskesses. And the Gemara had a kash on that. How do you know that's how you dash in the pasuk? Maybe you should dash in the pasuk the other way. Maybe dash in the pasuk is when could you eat a fish? If it even has Snabe Vikaskesses, that's only if you find it by Yamim Uvadchalim. But if you find the fish anywhere else, you're not allowed to eat it, even if it has Snabe Vikaskesses. That was the Gemara's question. So the Gemara said, we know how we can get clarity in what this pasuk of Ezeh Toichlu is talking about by looking at the next pasuk that says, if it doesn't have Snabe Vikaskesses, you're not allowed to eat it if it's B'yamim Uvadchalim. So that pasuk clearly is telling you that where are you forbidden from eating a fish without nabe v'kaskesses? That's only if it's b'yamim and cholim. But in any other place, you would not be forbidden from eating a fish that did not have simonim. So that teaches us how we should understand this pasuk. And Avada, this pasuk is telling us that you're allowed to eat fish without simonim if you didn't find them b'yamim and cholim. So on the one hand, you could look at it from two perspectives. On the one hand, the first pasuk of Ezeh Toichlu is the main makar that you don't need simonim if you find the fish in an alternative body of water. But on the other hand, you could argue that I only know pshat in this pasuk because of the next pasuk where the Torah says don't eat if it doesn't have snabe v'kaskesses. And therefore, there could be a discussion of what would be the pasuk where we would say it's more explicit, the halacha that exempts different bodies of water. Which one is the more explicit one? So let's have a look now at the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know which was the sosum and which was the mefarish. Zok the Gemara, hi sosum by mefarish. Zok the Gemara, pligi ba Rab Acha v'Ravina. Rav Acha and Ravina were arguing about this. Chad Omar, yesh loy mefurish. The pasuk that's talking about heter, which is the pasuk we just quoted, as that toichlu, that's the one that's mefurish. The ein loy sosum, and the pasuk that forbids you to eat fish without the simonim, that's what the Brasha refers to as the sosum. The Chad Omar, the other one, said exactly the opposite. Ein loy mefurish v'yesh loy sosum. What is the reasoning of each of these two options? My time of the Amar Yeshle Mefarish, Amarloch, Mineu. It's from the primary Makar is from the pasuk of Ezeh Toichlu, the Kamishtori Kalim, that we allow you to eat fish and other creations from Kalim even though it didn't have simana. So that's why he calls that mefarish. My time with the bandomer ain't like mefarish. The hayu, the kabuchach ahich. The only way I know that Zet is talking leheter and not lahachmir is only from the pasuk of Isser. The imehech, if you only add the pasuk of Zet Havamina, I might have interpreted differently, and that is that the kalim avagav the isleinami loy. If it's not in a yamim or a nachal, rather it's in a keli, I would have thought that there, even with some money, we can't eat it. Kamash will on the second pasuk, so the second pasuk is the one that's more mafurish. So that takes us to the end of this sukkah that was relatively complicated, and the whole purpose of this complicated situation that we just went through was only to find the purpose for the words azet toichlu. We were looking for a need for the Torah to tell us heter, and we ended up applying that need to the klal prat to klal or ribu mid ribui that's discussing which bodies of water are exempt. We knew if the body of water are in a keli like a barrel, it's exempt. And the Zet Toichlu tells you to add that exemption to boyros, shichin, and ma'aros as well. Okay, Gavaltic. Now we're coming into the very end, the final stretch of Elu Trefus. So we're starting with we're going to finish up with a soft landing without such a complicated sugi. Amar Avuna, lo yilish beinish shichra b'tzavyasa b'orta. They used to strain their beer because I guess the beer had pieces in it. The way they would strain it is they would take a barrel and they would put chips of wood on it. They must have had some type of mesh to support those chips of wood. And then they pour the beer over those chips of wood, and the chips of wood would block whatever debris they didn't want to drink from entering into the barrel below. But you know what else would get trapped by those chips of wood? Little organisms. Zokt Rav Huna, don't do such a straining in the evenings where it's not bright and you cannot see things. Why? Dilma parish la'il mitzviyasa. Maybe some of the organisms will get stuck on the wood. Now we learned that when are you allowed to drink, ingest those organisms? That's only if you bent down to the bar and you drank it straight out. Once these organisms are extracted and they're separated from the water, now they're usher. And even if you put them back in, they remain usher. Therefore, if you're going to strain the beer, it's possible that some of these small organisms will get caught on your strainer. You won't see them because it's dark, it's night, and then they'll fall into the new barrel and you'll end up drinking them. And those would be shrotzim with an iser daraisa. Dilma parishla il mitzviyasa. Maybe some of those organisms will get stuck on the wood which was designed to strain them out. V'hadu nafel lakasa, and then they'll fall back in to your kois. That would be an iser daraisa, because now that these organisms were removed from the water, they qualify as a sheretz al-aretz, and are an iser daraisa. Frag to Gemara, if you're going to tell me you can't strain, well, then even in the original bucket that they're in, you shouldn't be allowed to drink from. Dilma parish lidafna demana, father nafilamana. You know how it is when there's bugs in the water, they try to climb up the wall, and then they can fall back in. So if you're not allowed to eat the organism once it comes out of the water, so then even if it's in the barrel, who's monitoring it the whole time to make sure none of these organisms try to climb out of the water up onto the wall above the water level and fall back in? So you shouldn't be able to eat them at all. So you've just undone this entire heter, because you can't rely on this heter anymore, because how would you be able to be reassured in any way that some of the insects didn't climb up and fall back in? So that wouldn't be a problem.
Are we done with the fish?
We are done with the fish.
So we have no resolution at all.
No resolution to what?
To how to be meforish these psukim, how to make sense out of them. We have two opinions.
We do. We do. You only need snapper because keses if it's biyamim uvin cholim, or if it's in charitz and unitzin. But everybody agrees if it's bar shichin amarais or kalim, you do not need snapper because keses.
So you can eat, like if some things are born in the keli, and so you can eat them. You can eat like crab and
If it never leaves the keli,
if
and it's
if it's born in the keli, never
no,
leaves.
not if it's born in the keli. If it was created through spontaneous generation. If an organism came from the outside and fell in, that of course is not allowed. It's only through spontaneous generation. Now you might ask, there is no such thing as spontaneous generation. Science has proven that incorrect.
Right.
So Zok Rav Dessler, that's not a kash on these Gemaras, because whatever appears to be spontaneous generation, because the naked eye can't see the reproductive process, that's considered spontaneous generation halachically. So if this is not a straight on the Gemara, the Gemara refers to spontaneous generation, even though technically it's not spontaneous generation. It's just that we can't recognize with the naked eye that there was breeding involved. But if there was a lobster that showed up, that we know for sure came from parents that were breeding. We're talking about microorganisms that you can't even tell that they appeared. And in fact, you're allowed to drink that water. You're not allowed to take it out. If the spontaneous generated organisms were generated there and stayed there and never left the water, well, then and only then, if you drink the water, you're allowed to ingest those as well.
So how does the Gemara express that idea of spontaneous generation?
Well, what it's saying is organisms that grow in these waters, means they grow mineu bay from the waters. Those are the ones that are allowed. That's what our Gemara is telling us.
Because you would think, I mean, I'm left thinking that you're allowed to eat some fish or some water creatures that don't have snapiver.
If and only if, that's correct. But if and only if they weren't created by parents, they were created through what at least appears to be spontaneous generation.
We have no examples.
What do you mean we have no examples? Look into water under a microscope. Do you remember several years ago there was a whole tumult about drinking tap water because they found microorganisms in them?
Yeah, those were little gnats or something.
Right, but there was a whole big shaila if that is even a problem. They must have held that either they leave the water or maybe they know they're breeding. But normally something that's small enough that you need a microscope to see it would not be a concern because of this.
We consider that a sheretz. There's no examples of a fish that doesn't have.
That's a good question that you're bringing up. Because snaber v'kaskesses, this whole parish of snaber v'kaskesses, we understand is a siman for a fish, which indeed it is. That's what the Torah is telling us. But the Torah also tells us that if it doesn't have snaber v'kaskesses, sheketzu lochem. So this is more drush, because the pasuk isn't talking about shrotzim. The pasuk is really talking about fish. Yet we're applying this halacha to shrotzim that sprout out of the water. Because the pasuk on its face is not talking about creepy crawlies. The pasuk on its face is talking about fish.
Water creatures, whatever you call them.
So, yeah, and what's the point of the machlokas? So they both agree.
We don't have a machlokas. They just have a different way of darshaning the psukim, but they both arrive at the same destination. According to Rashi, Tosfos holds there's a slight machlokas.
Okay.
So there's basically three rules when it comes to these shrotzim that you're allowed to eat. A is you have to drink it straight out of the pond. You can't take a ladle, put it into the cistern, and then drink. Once it's removed, it's forbidden already, because then it's already called a sheretz, hasheretz ala oretz, which is what we're discussing here as well. If they come out, Number two is it cannot have come from somewhere else. It had to have been spontaneously generated, or at least appear to be that way. And rule number three is it cannot be disgusting to you, because if it's disgusting to you, then there's an issue of Baal Tashaksu. So it's only okay if you can handle it, if you're not verekeled by it. But if you're verekeled by eating a creepy crawly, there would be the issue of Baal Tashaksu.
Well, some people can't stand herring. I don't know. We have
There's
to check their
yichus,
you know.
There could be the bottle daita. Okay, Gemalden. Okay. So let's see what the Gemara says over here. Umina tamer. So Zokmer Haini Rabise. If the insects climb up the wall of the barrel and fall back in, that's not a concern for us. You know why? Because that's their norm. That's their norm habitat, how they operate, and that wouldn't exclude them from the heter. Umina tamer. How do we know that you have this concept of Haini Rabise? If it's in its normal habitat and in its normal process, that's not going to be a problem. The Tanya we learned, Minayin l'rabbis boyer shichnum arois. You can bend down and drink from them, and you don't have to refrain from drinking. So you can't take it out, but you're allowed to drink from them. Hamad loymar ezet teichlu mikol asher b'moy. I v'leiches dilma parish l'dafne v'hader nafel. Why isn't the Brisa worried that a bug might crawl out a little bit and then fall back in? You see, that's not a concern. There you'll say, in this case, you're not worried that an insect will climb out of the water and fall back in, because since that's its norm way to operate, we would say that it never left its habitat. I actually have a Tana that will prove your halacha that if you strain it, you wouldn't be allowed to. You have to be careful to make sure that those bugs don't fall back in. It says, Kol hasheretz al haaretz. The rabbis yavchushin shesininon. Yavchushin are a type of insect that you strained out. Time of the sininon. The whole problem is only because you strained it out, and now it's out of the medium, out of the liquid that it's in. If you never strained it, it will be mutter, and we're not worried that it might have climbed up the wall and fell down. Amar Shmuel. Now this Shmuel we had already once before, and he said, Kisha Shesliya. If you have rotten gourds, a rotten pumpkin, a rotten cucumber, and there's worms inside it, and once again, we're assuming the Gemara is working with spontaneous generation. So there are worms that have appeared to look like they were generated from within the actual fruit. But avia, if it's still connected to the tree, it's asura mishamasheretz hasharetz alaretz. Because when this insect is crawling around inside this rotten fruit, and this fruit is connected to the ground, we consider it like it's a sheretz alaretz. If the fruit only got wormy after it was already cut down from the tree, so if there's worms running around this loose fruit, then it's not sheretz alaretz. So if you remember, we said that since these insects don't live more than 12 months, the way to know whether or not the sheretz was in the fruit before you harvest it, and then it's usher, or if it only was generated after it was harvested, then it's mutter, is you wait 12 months. And if the insect is still alive, then you assume that the insect came later, and then you can eat it. It's not a problem, because it was never sheretz, hasheretz alaretz. So Zok Gemara Lema Messiah, maybe we could bring a raya to Shmuel's halach. The Tani Chada, we learned one brisa, ala aretz, hasheretz alaretz is usher, lohaitzi, es azizin shebadoshin. This excludes zizin, which are pests that you find inside lentils. So Rashi, they're going to be mutter. You know why? Because they were never on the aretz. They were only in these loose adoshim. Yitushin are the type of insects that you find in klisim. I'm not sure what klisim are. Rashi, it's the type of bean, min kidneys. v'tayla shebetmorim, or a worm that would be found in dates, v'shebegregres, or in figs. So one brisa says that those are not going to be usher al sheretz al aretz. V'tanya idich kol sheretz al aretz l'rabbis tayla shebeikreization v'shebeikregafanim. So we have one brisa that says if you find the worms in these pairs, they're usher, and you have another brisa that says if you find the worms in these pairs, they're mutter. What's the difference? My love, let's suggest ed pera. In both cases, the worms were generated inside the fruit itself. So why is there a difference where one brisa asers and one brisa is mater? The brisa that asers is speaking where the worms were generated while the fruit was still connected to the tree. So therefore, it's called hasheretz al haaretz. And the brisa that says that these bugs are mutter are bugs that were generated in fruit that were already cut off. And that's the raya to Shmuel. Zok to Gemara, no, you don't have a raya. Maybe we could say, let's say both cases they're connected. So the brisa that says they're also is good. The brisa that says it's mutter v'loikasha haba pera haba ilana gufa. If it's in the Paris itself, that's when we'll say it wasn't sheretz al haaretz. It was in the peri. It never left the peri, even though it's connected. And the brisa that says also is speaking where it's on the tree itself, and it's called dekanami. Which ones are usher? The ones where the bugs are found on the stems, on the branch, meaning they're outside of the peri, but on the outside of the tree. That's sheretz al haaretz. But if they never left the inside of the peri, maybe then it would be mutter. So you don't have a raya to Shmuel. Zog to Gemara weiter. Shema mina. Boy Rabbi Yosef. What about Parsho Mesa? We're saying now that if the insect never left the fruit, according to Shmuel, if it was cut down, this insect is not usher because it never qualified as hasheretz al haaretz. It was always part of the peri. So how about Parsho Mesa? What about if the insect came out of the fruit, it fell to the ground, it dropped dead, and now you want to eat it? It never had a chance to be sheretz al haaretz because when it fell to the ground, it was dead. It died. So therefore, it was never sheretz al haaretz. Would that be usher because it lemaisa came out of the peri, even though it wasn't literally crawling on the ground, or not? Or miktsasamahu. What if part of the insect came out and walked around, but the other part of the insect remained inside? It was a long insect. Would that qualify as now an insect that's sheretz al haaretz? Or la'aver oilam? What if you're holding a grape in your hand and the worm pops out of it and you scoop it up in the air into your mouth? So it never had a chance. It never had a chance to be sheretz al haaretz. And Rashi says this is a im tim tzaloimar. So Rashi says as well, im tim tzaloimar, pirsha umesim muteris. If you're going to learn that when it fell to the ground it died, you never had a chance to walk around, maybe the reason why it's muteris, since it died, it was never in a position where it would have been able to walk around on the ground. But if you scooped it up in midair, it was going to walk on the ground, but you scooped it up before. So maybe that would be considered a sheretz al haaretz. Zok to Gemara teku. Boy Rav Ashi, legag tomorrow. What happens if the bug leaves the inside of the fruit and it climbs onto the outside of the fruit? Question is, do you say hainu ravise? Do you say it still never left the fruit because it's still in where it normally goes? So would that be considered sheretz al haaretz? Mao. And even if you hold that, that's called exiting the fruit, and it is sheretz al haaretz. What about legag gari nosamau? What would happen if normally these bugs form in the pit? They form in the pit of the fruit. What if it just punctured out of the pit and it was on the pit, between the pit and the meat? Would would that also be considered Hani Revise, or would that be considered leaving the peri and it would become a sheretz? So you might ask, how in the world would you see that if it's within the peri? So the first of my masber, when you cut it open, you saw that there is a little insect in there, and you saw a hole in the pit. So we know that it came out of the pit. Mahu. Or mitmar latmar. What if you had two dates that were touching each other, and the bug drilled out of one into the next, but it never saw the light of day? Mahu, what would be the halacha? Zok to Gemara, teku. Amar Absheshes, Barei de Rav Idi, Kukiani. Kukiani are worms that spontaneously grow in the lungs or in the spleen of an animal, of a cow. Asiri there will be also. Why is that? My time, my alma also. We can assume that they didn't generate within the animal itself, rather they came in to the body because the cow ingested it. Frank Gemara, if the cow ingested it, how come you found it in the lungs? Shouldn't you have found it in its digestive system? It should be in that pathway, in the digestive system, not in the lungs or in the liver. There are those who learn that this is not what happened. Rather, they're mutter. My timer, mine gavli, they spontaneously generated from the animal itself, and therefore they were never sure it's halaretz. Amar Ravashi, pshita, it's pashut. The ima amakasi, because if they came in from the animal ingesting something, where would we have found it? Lishtakhu derech beisirei. Behilchasa halacha l'maisa we paskin kokiani is asuri, and even though we didn't find them in the digestive system, we can still assume that they came from the outside. If they came from the outside, how did they get into the animal? So to Gemara, what probably happened was, my time and mainim, the animal fell asleep, and the insect crawled into its nose, got into its lungs, and from there it made its way through the different arteries to the other parts of the body. When it comes to Tailoim, Darni de Bisra, worms that you find in the meat of a cow, asiri, they are going to be awesome. So when you take the skin off the animal, if you find bugs there, it's usher. And the Gemara is going to shortly explain the reason for it. However, the kavri sharin, if you take off the skin of a fish and you find an insect in there, that will be mutter. Amal Ravina li'imei. Ravina told his mother, I'm not concerned. I'm happy to eat these. Ivlali, the only thing is I don't want to see it because it's disgusting. So mix it in with the rest of the fish. Make a filter fish for me so I don't see the pieces that you chop up to give me. And then I'll be happy to eat it. He held it wouldn't be awesome. How would he have been able to eat it? Why is it different than the brisa that we learned? We have a brisa that says beferish that we learned from a pasuk that these worms that spontaneously grow in a behema, that they're going to be osir. Amarlei hachiashta. I'll tell you why it's mutter if it's from fish, but it's osir if it's from a behema. Because behema the b'shchita hu de mishtaria. Behema, in order for it to be mutter, you need it to become hutar with shchita. The problem is if there's a living organism that was spontaneously generated from the meat of an animal, when you shecht it, the shchita will not be matter that part, and that will remain ever minachai. But bahani midaloika mahanyala shchita, about these little organisms, the shchita of the animal that was hosting it will not be matter these separate identified organisms. So therefore, bisirayu kaimon, they remain within Isra Ever Minachai. Even if they're not Asr al Trotzim, because they were never sure it's al Haaretz, but they definitely will have a problem of Ever Minachai. Avol dogim, but if it's spontaneously generated from fish, Vasiva Ba'alma mystery, anything from a fish doesn't need shchita at all. So therefore, yes, the creepy crawly that you find in the skin of a fish is no issue because it's not sheretz because one sheretz halaretz, and it's not even menachai because you don't have to shech a fish. Bahani kikagavlon vaheter kagavlon. So then, when they are growing out of the skin of the animal, they're always heter. They never require a shchita to be matir them. Taner Rabbanan, hoylech al gochain. The Torah says if it's hoylech al gochain, it's also to eat. That's referring to a nachat. It says kol hoylech al gochain. To the koil is l'rabish hashilshal, a worm. V'esadoim l'shilshal, and any other animal that's similar to a worm. Al arba, it says kol hoylech al arba za'akrib. That's referring to a scorpion that goes on 4 legs. Kol hoylech l'rabish is a chepushas. V'esadoim l'chepushas. These are other types of creepy, crawly things similar to scorpions. Then the pasuk is Ma'ber Aglaim. Then Nadal, that's a centipede. Ad Kol, to Ad Kol Ma'ber Aglaim, the rabbi is a doima, is a doima l'doima. Any insect that has more than 4 legs, even though it doesn't have 100 legs, it will still be included in the Isser of the Shrotzim. Tanya Rabbi Yosy ben Damascus Omer. Now we have a little bit of a Agadita. Livioson, the Livioson that we're going to have, lost Lovoi, Dak Tohar, who it's a kosher fish. Shenemar, Gaiva Afike Megadim, which means it's proud of its impenetrable shield. And that we're going to see in a moment. The Gemara is going to say is referring to these scales. Hachtav Chadudi Charish, it's going to have very sharp, parts to it. That's referring to, we're going to see is referring to the fins. So afikim megadim elukas kashim. Good boy. Those are the scales. Tachtav chadudi cheresh elus napirin sheperechbem. Those are its fins. So that's how you know that the levyasin is kosher. So the mefarshim ask, the tzaddikim are going to be zoichet to eat from the levyasin. Can you suggest that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to feed everybody a tray from the bird, a tray from the fish? So there are those who answer that it could be a Hayrah Shah at that time that will be allowed to eat it. Or we know the Gemara says somewhere that the Chazir will eventually become a Malagera and it will become kosher. So maybe this fish will become kosher. But there are those who learn that the Chiddush is just that it's a dag, that the Levyasin is a fish. That's what the Gemara is telling us here, rather than the Levyasin being some type of other animal. But they do say that there'll be special halachos for that Suda. Because we know what's going to shech the sharabar, it's going to be the fins of the levyasin when they fight. But the fins of a fish have pricks on them. They're not perfectly smooth, so that wouldn't be a good shechita. So it could be that whole Suda is not going to be conventional. So Baruch Hashem, we were zoichet to finish Perak El Trevis, B'lineder Hadin Alach El Trevis, B'lineder Hadin Alach El Trevis, B'lineder Hadin Alach El Trevis.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach. Everyone should have an awesome day.
Safe trip the rest of the way.
Shkoyach, thank you.